everybody, my name is Lisa. I'm going to tell you a lot about the ketogenic diet today. I hope you don't mind, and I hope you will learn a lot about the ketogenic diet. Well, ketogenic diet is not something that is from the future, that is crazy scientific stuff. It just means it's a high fat, adequate protein and low carbohydrate diet that in medicine it is used just primarily to treat difficult to control epilepsy in people, mainly children. So the diet forces the body to burn fats faster than carbohydrates do. So normally carbohydrates or carbs contain in food that are converted into glucose. And then it's transported around the body, and it is particularly important in fueling the brain functions. But if there's very little carbohydrate in diet, the liver converts fat into fatty acid and ketone bodies. So what the ketones bodies passes into the brain and replaces the glucose as an energy source. So an elevated level of ketone bodies in blood will be known as the ketosis, and it leads to reduction in the frequency of the epileptic seizures. So it's very, very important kind of diet for a lot of reasons, mainly the medical benefits that it has for epileptic people, and anything to cure or reduce the epileptic seizures, very good, especially if it's not a medicine that has many side effects, especially for kids. The original therapeutic diet for pediatric epilepsy provides just enough protein for body growth and repair and sufficient calories to maintain the correct weight for the height. So this classic ketogenic diet contains 4:1 ratio of weight of fat to combine to the protein and carbohydrate. This is achieved using high carbohydrate, excluding the high carbohydrate foods such as starchy fruits and vegetables, bread, pasta, grains, and sugars, while increasing the consumption of food in high fat such as nuts, creams, and butter. So most dietary fat is made out of molecules called long chain triglycerides, or LCT. The medium chain triglycerides, MCT, is made from fatty acid with shorter carbon chains than LCT, and they're more ketogenic. So many of the MCT diet uses the form of coconut oil, which is MCT, to provide around half of the calories, as less overall fat is needed in this diet. A greater proportion portion of carbohydrate and protein can be consumed, and it allows a greater variety of food choices. Yeah. Well, I can tell you a lot more about the history of this thing. So ketogenic diet is a mainstream therapy that does not use pharmaceutical drugs, which was developed to reproduce the success and remove the limitations, of the mainstream use of fasting to treat epilepsy. Although it was popular in 1920s and 30s, it was largely abandoned in the favor of new anticonvulsant drugs. So most individuals with epilepsy can successfully control their seizures with this new medicine back then. So there were 20 to 30% failed to achieve the control of despite trying a number of different drugs. So for this group of people and for the children, the diet has once again found a very good role in the epilepsy management. Well, fasting. Okay, physicians of ancient Greece treated diseases including epilepsy by altering their parents' diet at an early treat site. In the Hippocratic corpus on the sacred disease covers the disease. It actually dates from 400 BC. The author argued that against the prevailing views of epilepsy was a kind of supernatural in origin and cure, and proposed dietary therapy at a rational and physical basis. So in the same collection, the author of Epidemics described the case of a man whose epilepsy is cured as quickly as it appeared through complete abstinence of food and drink alone. These were obviously not successful. In the first modern study of fasting as a treatment for epilepsy was in France, 1911. So there were 20 epilepsy patients of all ages were detoxified by consuming low-calorie and vegetarian diet combined with periods of fasting and purging. Most benefited, two benefited enormously but failed to maintain the compliance with the imposed restrictions because it is hard. The diet improved the patient's mental capabilities in contrast to their medications. Potassium bromide, which dulled the mind. Well, around this time, Bernard McFadden, an American exponent of the physical culture, popularized the use of fasting to restore health. His discipline and the osteopathic physician Hugh Conklin of the Battle Creek, Michigan, began to treat his epilepsy patients by recommending fasting. So Conklin conjectured the seizures were caused by a toxin secreted from Peyer's patch in the intestines that was discharged into the bloodstream. He recommended a fast lasting 18 to 25 days to allow the toxins to dissipate. Conklin probably treated hundreds of epilepsy patients with his water diet and boasted of a 90% cure rate in children, failing to 50% in adults. So later the analysis only showed 20% of his patients achieved freedom from seizures, and 50% had some improvement. Conklin's fasting therapy was adopted by neurologists in the main practice. In 1916, Dr. McMurray wrote to the New York Medical Journal claiming to have successfully treated epilepsy patients with fast, followed by a starch and sugar-free diet since 1912. In 1921, H. Raleigh Galen reported his experience to American Medical Association convention. He had seen Conklin's success firsthand and attempted to reproduce the result in 36 of his own patients, and he achieved similar results, despite having studied the patients for a short time. And then the further studies in 1920s indicated that seizures generally returned after the fasting. Charles Howland, one of the Conklin's successful patients, and a wealthy New York corporate lawyer, gave his brother John a gift of $5,000 to study the ketosis of starvation. As a professor of pediatrics of Johns Hopkins Hospital, John Howland used the money to fund the research undertaken by neurologist Stanley Cobb and his assistant William G. Lennox. So there are many outcomes to this, the history of the ketogenic diet. So from 1921 onward, Roland Woodyard reviewed the research on diet and diabetes, and he reported that 3 water-soluble compounds, they were produced by the liver in otherwise healthy people when they were starved, or if they consumed a very low carbohydrate and high fat diet. Russell Wilder at the Mayo Clinic built on his research and coined the term ketogenic diet to describe the diet that produced a high level of ketone bodies in the blood through the excess of fat and lack of carbohydrate. So Wilder hoped to obtain the benefit of fasting in a dietary therapy that would be maintained indefinitely. So his trial on a few epilepsy patients in 1921 was the first use of ketogenic diet as a treatment for epilepsy. So Wilder's colleague, pediatrician Minnie Peterman, later formulated a classic diet with a ratio of 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight in children, 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrate per day. The remainder of the calorie from the fat. Peterman's work in the 1920s established the techniques for induction and maintenance of the diet. Peterman documented positive effects like improved alertness and behavior and sleep, and adverse effects like nausea, vomiting due to excess ketosis. The diet proved to be very successful in children. Peterman reported in 1925 that 95% of 37 young patients had improved seizure control in a diet, and 60% became seizure-free. So 1930, the diet has also been studied in 100 teenagers and adults. Clifford Barburka, also from Mayo Clinic, reported that 56 of the older patients improved on the diet and 12% became seizure-free. Although adult results are similar to the modern studies of children, they did not compare as well to contemporary studies. So, Barburka concluded that the adults were least likely to benefit from the diet, and use of ketogenic diet in adults was not studied again until 1999. So let's discuss the 1990s, the revival of ketogenic diet. Ketogenic diet achieved the national media exposure in the US in October 1994, when NBC Dateline television program reported the case of Charlie Abrams, son of Hollywood producer Jim Abrams. The 2-year-old suffered from epilepsy that had remained uncontrolled by mainstream alternative therapies. Abrams discovered a reference to the ketogenic diet in the Epilepsy Guide for Parents and brought Charlie to John Freeman at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, which had continued to offer the therapy. Under the diet, Charlie's epilepsy was rapidly controlled and his development progress resumed. This inspired Abrams to create Charlie Foundation to promote the diet and fund research. A multi-center prospective study began in 1994. The results were presented to the American Epilepsy Society in 1996 and were published in 1998. Well, there followed an explosion of scientific interest in the diet. In 1997, Abrams produced a TV movie, First Do No Harm, starring Meryl Streep, in which a young boy's intractable epilepsy is successfully treated by a ketogenic diet. And by 2007, the ketogenic diet was available from around 75 centers in 45 countries, and less restrictive variant, such as the modified Atkins diet, that were used, particularly among older children and adults. Ketogenic diet has also under investigation for treatment for a wide variety of disorders other than epilepsy. Well, these are so many things that we can think about. How about let's just look at the different variants, different ketogenic diets. So the ketogenic diet is calculated by a dietitian for each child. Age, weight, and their activity level, culture, the food preferences all affect the meal plan. First, the energy requirements are set at 80 to 90% as recommended daily amount. For child's age, the high-fat diet requires less energy to produce than a typical high-carbohydrate diet. Highly active children or those with muscle spasticity require more calories than this. Immobile children require less. The ketogenic diet ratio of the diet compares the weight of the fat of the combined weight of the carbohydrate and protein. This is typically 4:1, but children who are younger than 18 months or older than 12 years who are obese maybe start on the 3:1 ratio. Fat is energy rich with 9 kilocalories per gram, 38 compared to 4 kilocalories per gram for carbohydrate or proteins. So portions of the ketogenic diets are smaller than normal. The quantity of fat in the diet can be calculated from the overall energy requirement and those chosen ketogenic ratio. Next, the protein levels are set to allow for growth and body maintenance and are around 1 gram protein for each kilograms of body weight. Lastly, the amount of carbohydrate is set according to what allowance is left while maintaining the chosen ratio. Any carbohydrate in medications and supplements must be subtracted from this allowance. So the total daily amount of fat, protein, and carbohydrate is then evenly divided across the meal. A computer program such as Keto calculator may be used to help generate the recipes. The meals often have 4 components: heavy whipping cream, a protein-rich food, typically meat, a fruit or vegetable or fat such as butter, vegetable oil, or fruits that are divided into 2 groups based on the amount of carbohydrate they contain. Vegetables are similarly divided into 2 groups. Foods within each of these 4 groups may be freely substituted to allow for variation without, needing to recalculate the portion size. Let's see, for example, cooked broccoli, Brussels sprout, cauliflower, green beans are all equal. Fresh or canned frozen foods are equivalent, but raw and cooked vegetables differ, and processed food are additional compilations. Parents are required to be precise when measuring the food quantities in an electronic scale, accurate to 1 gram. The child must eat the whole meal and cannot have extra proportions. Any snacks must be incorporated into the meal plan. Very small amount of MCT oil may be used to help with the constipation or to increase ketosis. The classic ketogenic diet is not balanced and only contains tiny portions of fresh fruit and vegetables, fortified cereals, and calcium-rich foods. In particular, B vitamin, calcium, and vitamin D must be artificially supplemented. This is achieved by taking 2 sugar-free supplements designed for patients' age, multivitamin with minerals, calcium, and vitamin D. So a typical day for a child on a 4:1 ratio: 1,500 kilocalories. Ketogenic diet comprises of breakfast, egg with bacon, 28 grams of egg, 11 grams of bacon, 37 grams of 36% heavy whipping cream, 23 grams of butter, and 9 grams of apple. Snack: peanut butter ball, 6 grams of peanut butter and 9 grams of butter. That's a lot of butter. Yes, I know, but this is the diet here. Very precise. Lunch: tuna salad, 28 grams of tuna fish, 30 grams of mayonnaise, 10 grams of celery, 36 grams of 36% heavy whipping cream, and 15 grams of lettuce. Snacks: keto yogurt, 18% of 18 grams of 36% of heavy whipping cream, 18 grams of sour cream, 4 grams of strawberries, and artificial sweetener. Dinner: cheeseburger with no bun, 22 grams of minced ground beef, 10 grams of American cheese, 26 grams of butter, 38 grams of cream, 10 grams of lettuce, and 11 grams of green beans. Snack: keto custard, 25 grams of 36% heavy whipping cream, 9 grams of egg, and pure vanilla flavoring. MCT oil. Normal dietary fat contains mostly long chain, the LCT fat. So MCT are more ketogenic than LCT because they generate more ketones per unit of energy when metabolized. Their use allows a diet with a lower proportion of fat and a greater proportion of protein and carbohydrate, leading to more food choices and a large proportion of sizes. The original MCT diet, developed by Peter Hutton-Lodger in the 1970s, derived 60% of calories from the MCT oil. Consuming the quality of the MCT oil caused abdominal cramps, vomiting, or diarrhea in some children. A figure of 45% is regarded as a balance between achieving good ketosis and minimizing gastrointestinal complaints. A classical modified MCT ketogenic diets are equally effective, and the differences in tolerability are statistically significant. The MCT diet is less popular in the United States, and MCT oil is more expensive than other dietary fats that is not converted into insurance company. Yes. Well, and so what happens is there are other applications. So ketogenic diet may be very successful treatment for several of the rare metabolic diseases. There are cases of reports of 2 children indicating that there may be possible treatment for astrocytomas. This is a type of brain tumor tumor. This also reports for autism, depression, migraine headaches, polycystic ovary syndrome, diabetes mellitus type 2 have also been shown to improve in a small case studies. There is evidence from uncontrolled clinical trials and studies in animal models, and a ketogenic diet can provide symptomatic and disease-modifying activity in a broad range of neurodegenerative disorders, including amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and may be also protective in traumatic brain injury and stroke. Because tumor cells are inefficient in processing ketone bodies for energy, the ketogenic diet has also been suggested as treatment for cancer, including glioma, as well as multiple sclerosis and other neurological disorders. And 2013 review say that there's enough suggestion potential benefit for ketogenic diet in cancer therapy that establishing clinical trials are probably warranted. At present, the only evidence of benefit in it's anecdotal, but designing effective trial to measure the effect of adopting a ketogenic diet could prove challenging. In March 2009, Axona was approved as medical food by U.S. Food and Drug Administration for dietary management of metabolic processes and nutritional requirement associated with mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Glucose metabolism by the brain is impaired by Alzheimer's disease, and it is proposed that the ketogenic bodies may provide alternative energy source. Caprylidine is a powdered form of medium chain triglyceride, specifically caprylic triglyceride. So these are many benefits of ketogenic diet. Not that it is proven to help the other diseases, but it seems to be a very good diet that could help lots of people achieve many things in their lives. So I will end this section at this stage. I hope you have learned a lot about ketogenic diet. Thank you for listening in today, and may you have a great day ahead. Goodbye.